So since Saman is absent today, so I'm going to conduct a session of Dhamma talk based on that concept and reality book. Let me share the screen. So we were basically discussing concept and reality book, which is compiled by Most Venerable Katakurunde Nyananda Thero. Actually, we have spent fair amount of time discussing what we come across in this book, one particular sutta, which is called Yavakalapi Sutta. Yavakalapi Sutta is very, very interesting one. And here in this chapter, Most Venerable Katakurunde Thero has heavily sort of analyzed it and has given fair amount of information about that sutta. And it's quite interesting and again giving very good directions, particularly for Chittanupassana. Because how we are creating various thoughts, what are the sources, what are the causes, what are the possibilities of creating thoughts are fairly explained in this Yavakalapi Sutta. So we have taken fair amount of time discussing those aspects. And if I just briefly summarize it, basically imagining is one aspect, what we call as the manyita, and then agitation, that is another aspect, what we call as injita, and palpitation is another aspect, what we call as pandita, and proliferation, papancha, is another aspect, and then conceit is another aspect, which is the managata, where those possibilities are there, and all those possibilities basically produce various kinds of thoughts, initiates different type of thinking, and promotes thinking, and ultimately even very subtle thoughts like this I am is a thought, is a kind of an agitation, it's a kind of imagination, say agitation, palpitation, proliferation, conceit, and all sorts of these causes can become materialized when we are thinking I am, here I am, or I am this, or I am that, I am not this, I am not that, I shall be, I shall not be, I shall become formless, so I shall become with some kind of a perception, I shall become with this some sort of a situation. So likewise, so we are imagining, we are thinking, we are forecasting, anticipating, and all sorts of either future related or either past related, even the present related, I-based thinking, I-centered thinking are fairly materialized because of these different causes explained in this Yavakalapi Sutta. So therefore, Katakurunde Thero has summarized here. It will be seen that each of the 9 propositions given above is qualified by 5 adjectives: manyitang, injitang, panditang, papanchitang, and managatang. This latter may be examined in the light of what we have already stated regarding the question of aspects in Buddhist psychology. Manyita, to think, points to the thought activity or imagination which gives rise to those propositions. So the I-based thinking, I-based imagining is something that we frequently sometimes conduct, and those actually is a kind of a root cause for different kinds of propositions. And then injita, to move, reminiscent of the term eja, which is a synonym for tanha, probably refers to the emotional appeal of the propositions. So we want to think, we want to look forward, we want to look back, and we want to be with the form, we want to be with the sound. So likewise, there's an inner yearning, inner kind of a craving for continuing with various kinds of external objects with the world. So that has created the mind fairly agitated. That's another form, another way how the thinking can initiate. And then panditang, to throb, to palpitate. We use them as characterized by the restless mental activity. So the mind is not tranquil, rather it becomes restless, and so that the thinking is promoted. So you are thinking in many different directions, so that is another aspect, that is the papanchita. But here the point is, so the mind is restless. Mind can't be quiet. Mind can't be tranquil. So this kind of a restless situation available in the mind is another way of generating various kinds of thoughts. Then Managatang traces their origin to the measuring and judging tendency inherent in the conceptual activity, which is itself a constant process of value judgment. So we continuously compare ourselves with another person. We compare our situation with another person's situation, our opportunity with another person's opportunity. So likewise, we are continuously comparing ourselves. How about myself and how about another person? How about you? So likewise, comparing is another source of generating various different kinds of thoughts. And in order to compare, actually, I have a self here. So I have a kind of a belief that there is a self here. Here I am. And this I am is now compared with another person, another being, another status. This is another cause of generating various different kinds of thoughts. Then papanchitang, to spread out, to expand, may likewise imply the prolific tendency in conceptualization. So concepts are essential for thinking. So without concepts, we can't think. So if we are able to calm down concepts, relinquish concepts, so that means mind has stopped. So there is no concepts means, so we can't think. So therefore, conceptual proliferation becomes one continuous activity, anticipated activity in human's mind. So people are therefore tends to think. They even overthink. That is what we call as the conceptual proliferation. So the other propositions portray perhaps more clearly the prolificity in the realm of ideation, the individuating, generalizing, particularizing, and dichotomizing. Dichotomizing tendencies which provide the scaffolding for theoretical superstructures. So basically, we are thinking based on various concepts, and ultimately we come up with various theories, various views, and it becomes the scaffolding, it becomes the base, the foundation for different kinds of. Ultimately, we come to certain conclusions, some sort of strong views, and that is what actually the next that we need to discuss. So we can become strongly adhere to a particular view when we are going through this kind of situation. The particular context in which papanchita occurs in this sutta thus lends color to the assumption that papancha signifies the inveterate tendency towards proliferation in the realm of ideation. So we have various kinds of ideas, various kinds of views, different theories. Based on those theories, we are thinking and we promote thinking, we overthink, we come to a particular conclusion and strongly hold that conclusion, and ultimately it becomes a strong view. And it could be even an entirely wrong view, even though we are holding it, even though we are thoroughly grasping it, adhering to that. Now we can continue from that onwards. Of an analogous character is a passage occurring at Anguttara Nikaya, 4th book, page 68. Here we find each of the alternatives of a quadrilemma being qualified in 7 ways suggestive of aspects. The quadrilemma concerns the state of the perfected one after his death and comprises the last 4 of the famous 10 moot points, known as the 10 indeterminates, or within brackets, Dasa Avyakata Vattuni. These 10, it may be added, together form a kind of questionnaire with which the ancient Indians used to confront any religious teacher of note. Now, there are 10 very difficult questions. And so the Indian thinking has used those 10 questions to verify a religious leader. So various kinds of people are there. They like to get into arguments. They want to start a debate. And these 10 points are usually one important aspect of their logic. And they go ahead with these 10 points and ask these 10 points from that so-called religious leader. So if that leader is, how that religious leader is answering, is actually something that these people may measure whether that leader is a good leader, good religious person or not, whether his teaching is correct or not. Interestingly, but all these 10 questions Buddha kept aside. He didn't go to answer even. He didn't give any answer. So he kept them aside. That's in a way very kind of surprise because people want some answer. So that's why they again and again persuade even the Buddha to answer these questions. But Buddha keep quiet when they are asking these questions. That's a very interesting part. Now that is what Bhante Jnanananda now going to discuss. This questionnaire, arranging dilemmas and quadrilemmas, seems to have been popularly regarded as a valid ready reckoner for evaluating any religious system, hence the flippancy with which it was put forward. The Buddha himself was confronted with it on several occasions, and in each case he rejected the questionnaire in toto, much to the dismay of the interrogators. He held that these 10 questions are the outcome of wrong reflection and hence do not admit of a categorical reply. Now, all the 10 questions are based on some root understanding, wrong understanding. So, based on a wrong understanding, people have created various difficult questions. And these questions are fairly religious, or we can say fairly transcendental. Talking about something more advanced in a way. Not related to our wives, husbands, presidents, politics, or say material things, or any kind of other, say, typical mundane activity, but talking about very high theories, very high dogmatic stuff. So that's why, so this the taste of these questions are very high. Only the people who are with some time to think, to proliferate, to think too much, have some sort of a spiritual aspect, only come up with these questions. So that's another interesting part. So typically people don't have that much of time to think about these things. They find it waste of time. But there are people who are quite interested about some philosophical aspects of life, some spiritual aspects of life, and ultimately they have these questions. They can come up with these questions. And Buddha anyway, Buddha didn't go to answer these questions. Instead, he kept them aside and didn't give a categorical reply. He declared that they are speculative views, which are a veritable jungle of error, or set of fetters which bring suffering, frustration, dejection, and anguish in their train. That being so, an attempt at their solution was not regarded as conducive to enlightenment. So Buddha didn't mention, so it is necessary to know these questions, or it is necessary to have a solution for these questions in order to become enlightened. Instead, these become quite irrelevant questions. So that's another area that we can think of. So Buddha didn't go to answer all the questions. So he understood that there are certain questions unanswerable, no point of answering. And it doesn't have any kind of a support coming towards the spiritual growth, to the emancipation, to realize Nibbana. So he basically, without afraid, he simply kept them aside. He didn't waste his time to answer them. He declared that they are speculative views. Now the passage under consideration contained in the quadrilemma is yet another exposition of the unwholesome character of these speculative views. In it we find the Buddha explaining to a certain monk why an Aryan disciple, conversant with the Dhamma, does not entertain any doubts with regard to the indeterminate points. Now another interesting point is, till we have certain questions regarding these 10 points, so that means we haven't understood the Dhamma. So that's why we have so many questions regarding this. That means our mind still proliferate based on these wrong views. So still we didn't thoroughly understood the Dhamma. And still we didn't really realize the Dhamma. So if we are able to realize the Dhamma, so these questions become irrelevant. And basically, the noble disciple is not afraid of these questions either. If someone is coming to ask, he don't have any regard to these questions, and he is not afraid of these questions because he thoroughly understood the Dhamma. He understood, okay, these questions are based on some wrong view, wrong understanding, particularly based on the self-view. Now, among these 10 questions, the last 4 are the ones particularly discussed in another sutta. Anyway, we'll read the passage given in the book. Ditti nirodhako bhikkhu sutavato arya savakassa vichikiccha nupajjati avyakata vattusu hoti tathagato parammaranati ko bhikkhu dittigata metam na hoti tathagato parammaranati hoticha na hoticha tathagato parammaranati neva hoti na hoti tathagato parammaranati ko bhikkhu dittigata metam asutava bhikkhu putujjano ditting nappajanati ditti samudayang nappajanati ditti nirodhang nappajanati ditti nirodhagamini patipadang nappajanati tassa sa ditti pavaddhati so na parimucchati jatiya jaramaranena sokehi paridevehi dukkehi domanassehi upayasehi na parimucchati dukkasmati vadami sutavācako bhikkave arya savako pajanati arya savako dittim pajanati ditti samudayam pajanati ditti nirodham pajanati ditti nirodhagami patipadam pajanati tassa sa ditti nirujjati so parimucchati jatiya jaramaranena soka dukkha parideva dukkasmati vadami. So, evam janam ko bhikkhu sutava arya savako evam passam hoti tathagato parammaranatipi na vyakaroti na hoti cha neva hoti na hoti tathagato parammaranati na vyakaroti evam janam ko bhikkhu sutava arya savako evam passam na chambati na kampati na chalati, na vedati, na santasang apajjati, avyakata vattusu. Hoti tathagato ko bhikkhu tanthagata metam, sanyagata metam, manyita metam, papanchita metam, upadana gata metam. Vippatisaro eso. Nahoti, hoticha, nahoticha, neva hoticha, nahoti, Vippatisaro eso. So everything is fairly concatenated there. So let me read the English translation and then we'll go to further analysis of this particular sutta. Verily, it is by the cessation of views, monk, that doubt ceases to arise in the instructed noble disciple as to unexplained points. Is the Tathagata after death? This is but a viewpoint, monk. Is the Tathagata not after death? Both is he and is he not after death? Neither is he nor is he not after death. These are but viewpoints. The uninstructed average man does not understand views, does not understand the origin of views, does not understand the cessation of views, does not understand the way leading to the cessation of views. For him, views grow, and he is not freed from birth, old age, death, from sorrows, grief, ills, tribulations. He is not freed from suffering, I say. But the instructed noble disciple understand views, understand their origin, their cessation, and the way leading to their cessation. For him, views cease, and he is freed from birth, old age, death, from sorrows, grief, ills, tribulations. He is freed from suffering, I say. Thus knowing, thus seeing, the instructed noble disciple indeed does not assert, is the Tathagata after death, and like questions. Thus knowing, thus seeing, the instructed noble disciple thus hold as unexplained the unexplained points. Thus knowing, thus seeing, the instructed noble disciple is not afraid, trembles not, wavers not, shakes not, despairs not concerning these points. Is the Tathagata after death and the like? These monks are but ways of craving, of perceptions, are but imaginings, conceptual proliferations, issues of grasping, are but a source of remorse. So this is a kind of some philosophical stuff gathered there. So basically, let me share another little short writing about this. So here I tried to summarize these two suttas in a table form so that we can easily understand what Buddha has meant here. So there are 10 indeterminates. So the basically means that we can't answer them. We can't give a definite answer. So Buddha haven't given a definite answer and Buddha kept them aside. So therefore they are called abhyakata vattu. So there is no proper solution for them. So Buddha simply kept them aside and Buddha mentioned that they are based on some wrong understanding. So what are they? Sassato loko. Is the world eternal? So this is the question. Asassato loko. Is the world not eternal? And then antava loko. Is the world finite? Anantava loko. Is the world infinite? Tang jivang tang sariram. Is the soul and the body are the same? Anyang jivang anyang sariram. Is the soul is one thing and the body the another. So what is it? And now we have covered 6 such abhyakata vattu, indeterminates, and the last 4 are the ones actually we just discussed in this previous suttas. So what are they? Hoti tathagato parammarana. So after death, a tathagata exists. So tathagata here means either Buddha or an arahant. Even for the arahant, the term tathagata is referred. So here, in general, it is mentioned for any arahant. So after the death, is the arahant going to exist? So that's the question. Nahoti tathagato parammarana. So after the death, is this arahant not going to exist? And hoticha nacha hoti tathagato parammarana. After that, tathagata both exist and does not exist. Neva hoti na hoti tathagato parammarana. After that, a tathagata neither exists nor does not exist. Now this is the quadrilemma actually highlighted in this previous sutta. So that is what Buddha particularly mentioned in this Abhyakata Sutta as a ditthigata meta. It's a viewpoint. Tanhagata meta. It's a ways of craving. Sanyagata meta. It's a ways of perceptions. Manyita meta. It's a kind of imagining. Papanchita meta. It's a conceptual proliferation. Upadanagata meta. And they are based on the issues of grasping. And Vippatisara also. So basically they are a source of remorse, source of regret. Now, in this Avyakata Sutta, actually only these 4 are discussed. But I suggest, I think that these qualities are very much common to the previous 6 Avyakata Vattu as well. So for all 10 Avyakata Vattu, therefore we can decide they are viewpoints, they are based on cravings, and they are perceptions, they are imaginings, they are conceptual proliferations, and they are issues of grasping, and again they are a source of remorse. Now, ditthigata meta. There are various views. Now, we also may understand, okay, they are views. It's very difficult to understand and fairly philosophical, and we can't give a particular answer. Whatever the way we answer, we get trapped. And so likewise, we understand, okay, there are some difficult stuff. There are some philosophical stuff. Actually, we might not have even think about it. But there are people who are interested about these kind of things, and they continuously think about these things. And particularly the spiritual people who have dedicated their time for some spiritual achievements sometimes can have various kind of views. So our mind is quite preferring any kind of thinking, and that thinking can lead to various views. Probably you all have heard about the term called vipallasa, where we can come to a kind of a wrong grasp or wrong kind of a understanding, kind of a distortion. So those distortions can happen at different levels. At one level, it is called sanya vipallasa, where how we perceive something is entirely based on wrong data. Data in the sense, those original data being fairly changed through our own perception, through our own kind of conditioning available in the mind. So our minds are already conditioned, and our minds basically are conditioned with our own likes and dislikes, various kinds of attitudes. So whenever we see something, we immediately incorporate our attitudes into that picture. We are not taking a very raw picture. Rather, onto that raw picture, we are inserting our attitudes, our likes and dislikes. So that is what ultimately we start consuming. That is what we start sort of analyzing or giving a kind of a definition, giving a kind of a understanding. But unfortunately, that very recognition is erroneous. So therefore, it is called sanya vipallasa. So through our senses, through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind. So whenever we see forms, hear sounds, smell various odors, taste various delicacies, or we go through various tangibles and we understand or cognize various kinds of thoughts, mental objects. So unfortunately, we are not perceiving them as it is. We are adding our own stuff into the picture. So therefore, we come up with what we call as a distortion. Now, interesting point is, now after we perceive some wrong way, based on that wrong cognition, actually we start thinking. We now think with respect to the past, with respect to the future, based on the present information, we start thinking. But since the data, whatever the ground, whatever the sources which we are using for thinking is erroneous, ultimately our thoughts are also erroneous. So our thinking become again erroneous. And after thinking, we come to a particular conclusion. And that conclusion is also wrong. And therefore, that is called the ditti vipallasa, where we come to a kind of a concluding decision. We come to a concluding remark, come to a kind of a point. And that is what ultimately we grasp, we thoroughly hold, we thoroughly adhere to, thoroughly believe, and becomes a wrong belief. So basically, these views actually, what here actually we are discussing in this 10 indeterminates are all such wrong views and wrong questions. And therefore, they are dittigata meta. They are a viewpoint. And particularly, we anyway have kind of a craving for these things. And we want to have a solution. So that's why even today, people are sending rockets, sending various spaceships to the space. They want to know whether the whole space is finite or whether it is infinite. And they are always keep on sending various spaceships to the outer space. They want to find out. They are so concerned about it. They are very interested about it. They have some kind of a craving to know what's the limit. Or is it the limitless space? And then sanyagata meta. And people have various perceptions, and so as a result of that, so they want to verify those perceptions. And all these are in a way, so those perceptions, wrong perceptions. Manyita meta, so imaginings. So people can imagine. So they keep on imagining things. So they can imagine a kind of an alien aircraft coming and they are sending weapons and they want to suck the resources from the earth. So they can imagine various things. So you know that the various alien related movies, how much people want to imagine things. And so likewise here, based on our imaginations, we can come up with these kinds of questions. So these are results of our imaginings. And papanchita meta. So based on conceptual proliferation, we can come up with these wrong views. And upadanagata meta. So we have grasped those views, strongly grasped these views. So that's why in terms of the grasping, upadana, so there are 4 categories sometimes mentioned: Kama upadana, Ditti upadana, Silabbata upadana, Attavada upadana. So Ditti upadana. So Ditti upadana are seen these kind of examples. So Ditti upadana. So we sometimes grasp various views. So sometimes if we consider typical household life, so they want to grasp some material stuff. You may be attached to your vehicle, you may be attached to your, say, status, social status, your education, your, say, social, family status, your children, your wife, your husband. So these are the kind of material stuff. But there are some people who are interested about immaterial stuff. So they want to have kind of a, say, mind-based food in order to think. So they keep on thinking on those lines. So they prefer thinking. They are not much interested about, say, maintaining a family life or economic crisis, and they don't much care about those, but they have some very philosophical ideas. Now, upadanagata meta means, so they grasp those ideas. So their domain is something different. And on the other hand, they are a source of remorse. And people are spending fair amount of time researching on these things and continuously thinking about these things, but ultimately they regret because they couldn't find an answer. And on the other hand, they have wasted fair amount of time. Now, let me conclude by giving a little further clarification given by Jnananda Thero. One can discern the criticism of quadrilemma in the 7 standpoints from which it is viewed. So 7 standpoints are these 7 standpoints viewed. Ditti gatang suggests the speculative nature of the view. Tanha gatang may well refer to the desire that prompts one to entertain these views. Sanya gatang reminds us of the sensory origin of the same. Manyitang points to the thought activity or imagination that precedes their formulation. Manyitang. So based on a person, based on I, a center of I, you have done the imagination. Upadanagatam refers to the grasping aspect of which makes them dogmas. So people grasp these things. Ultimately, they become a kind of a dogma. And then Vippatisaro emphasizes the delusion and wavering that they bring about. So sometimes people threat these views, so they want to break these views and they come up with a different view. And so my view and their view are not telling each other. So they start arguing each other. They confront each other. And when they attack, okay, I am going to suffer because I want to hold my view. I want to protect my view. So my view is the best view. Your view is not a good view. Your view is quite inferior view. So this is how we start promoting our view. So you can think, people even talk different sermons, they deliver various preachings, and they talk about fairly sophisticated stuff. And still there are many followers. And recently also in Sri Lanka, some controversial point happened and one person start publishing various talks on YouTube and he start publishing them, and ultimately there is a group, and once he arrived the country, they came and venerate him and respect him, and all this, suddenly things have happened. So these are based on the views. So people can talk very highly with some dogmatic ideas, but there are followers as well. So Vippatisaro emphasizes the delusion and wavering that they bring about. As for Papanchitam, we may infer that it visualizes the proliferating, expanding, and diffusing quality of the speculative views of questions. The above quadrilemma is actually illustrative of those qualities, since it is an unwarranted extension of linguistic conventions to what is transcendental. So these are not really kind of mundane stuff, but they have a little taste of transcendence. So they are not talking about our children. They are not talking about the, say, spouse. They are not talking about our house or our president or prime minister or our world, but they are quite transcendental. They are talking about something more. So therefore people with some high-minded thinking, so they start thinking about these things. But ultimately they also get trapped. So you can understand, okay, that there are different categories of people. Some people are not that interested about this spiritual stuff. So they simply want to enjoy this life. They are completely bounded by the five sensual cords. So they have to concern about their children, husband, wife, enjoying as much as possible. So they are completely trapped in the five sensual cords. There's another category who are interested about some supernatural stuff or some psychic powers or maybe some kind of spiritual things. But unfortunately, they also get trapped in these kinds of situations. So we can see how people are trapped in these areas. So we'll discuss further with this book some other suttas which Katakurunda Thero has highlighted. And with that, I'd like to conclude today's Dhamma sermon. And if you have any question, please feel free to ask.
Sarai Bhante, we have 9 questions today.
Okay.
Question number 1. This is of 9. This is a Dhamma sermon question. Dear Bhante, thank you for the great explanation about conceit and the subtle causes of conceit, such as race, health, respect, wealth, learnedness, morality, concentration, etc., which we can easily relate to.
Yeah. So there's no question there, Chamila.
No, I'm still, sorry, Bhante, I'm still in the question.
Okay.
From outside view, it looks like this is fundamental and drives the next level of craving, liking, disliking, desire, etc. Does that mean conceit or moha drives tanha? Or is it the other way around, Bhante? With metta, that's the end of the question.
Actually, tanha, ditti, mana are one strong strings where the proliferation is originated. So when it comes to the commentary, they particularly highlight tanha, ditti, mana. So there are various ways of thinking proliferations based on craving. So the craving becomes the most dominant factor in that thinking. On the other hand, there are various views. Now, as we discussed just now, so these are also proliferations, but they are based on the views. So we strongly grasp a particular view, so start thinking and imagining and talking, arguing, debating, because particular view is so strongly grasped. So views become one source of proliferation. And then mana is another area where we continuously compare ourselves with another person. So we imagine here I am is one person and here you are another person. So I want to compare myself with you. My situation with your situation. So likewise, we are tend to compare because the mana, the conceit is there. So therefore, we can say they are fairly independently working together. But on the other hand, there are kind of links as well among them. So for example, you are grasping a view because there is a tanha, there is craving. On the other hand, we start comparing ourselves because we have some kind of a misunderstanding, kind of an ignorance, thinking that there is a person here. Kind of a personality view is there. So likewise, there are very intricate, very subtle interdependencies among these things. So therefore, we can't say, okay, at first we come up with craving, then the view or something like that, rather than telling like that. So there are many different interrelationships among these. But the important thing is we should address as much as possible all these and keep the mind fairly quiet as much as possible. Overthinking is something really vicious. That's what actually the whole theme of this book that we need to understand. So proliferation is really a vicious area. So people are really suffering from overthinking. And one important aspect of vipassana is papancha upasama, calming down conceptual proliferation.
Question number 2 of 9 is a general question. Dear Swamin Wahanse, can you explain what is the real meaning of enjoying the moment, which comes with mindfulness practice? What I have gathered from your guidance is that to enjoy the moment, one needs to establish somewhat impartial attitudes to the sense bases and observe something neutral and simple with a silent mind. Can sensual indulgence be justified as enjoying the moment while immersed in the activity? With metta, that's the end of the question.
Yeah, actually, that is a different area in the sense now. Sensual indulgence is one thing. Now here we are encouraging mindfulness with a very neutral object, and there also we encourage, okay, you just enjoy the breathing. I mean, that's a different kind of enjoyment. I mean, even though it's a little too far, we are talking enjoyment. It is not kind of, we can't say that it's a kind of sensual indulgence that we are talking here. So, but the point is, breath being a very neutral object, so people can't find it interesting. So they get easily distracted because it doesn't provide you excitement. It doesn't provide you any kind of excitement. So easily the mind get distracted. So in order to encourage the yogi, okay, the teachers are continuously saying, okay, you got to enjoy the present moment. You just be with the present moment and be with each breath. Okay, each in-breath, okay, you become energetic, you become joyful. And each out-breath, okay, you become so relaxed, so released. So likewise, I mean, we are little, encouragement is there. It doesn't mean we are promoting any kind of sensual activity. Rather, it's a little encouragement for mindfulness of breathing practice. Ultimately, interesting point is as our defilements fade away, hindrances fade away, interestingly, each in-breath, each out-breath can bring us happiness that you may have already experienced. Because once the hindrances are abandoned, so the breath becomes a source of happiness. But that happiness is kind of a transcendental happiness. It is not a mundane kind of happiness. We can say it's an unworldly kind of happiness, not based on the sensual objects. Rather, it is based on how your mind has abandoned the hindrances, defilements. So as a result of that, now you have a transcendental kind of happiness, what we call as a niramisa piti. That is something that we can say continue. And Buddha say you don't need to afraid of that because it does not promote any kind of anusaya, does not promote any kind of latent tendency. And because it is not based on the five sensual cords, independent of our typical senses, five senses, you can experience this kind of a happiness. Therefore, so the jhana happiness and whatever this meditative happiness is something we can encourage, but ultimately, by the way, we need to abandon that also. That is where the understanding or the realization or the wisdom part, the vipassana is highlighted.
Question number 3 of 9. This is mindful sitting. Dear Bhante, my sitting practice is mindfulness on breath. After 5 to 10 minutes, I can establish constant mindfulness on the observations, such as the touching sensations, hot and cold nature, and smooth and grossness of the in and out breath. My mind becomes calm and quiet during this constant observation period, and the breath starts fading away. It takes another 5 to 10 minutes for the breath to become very subtle and sometimes to vanish completely. During this time, various thoughts appear and the mind gets distracted. but come back automatically after a short period as I try to keep the attention. When I reduce the effort of keeping attention to the calming breath, the mind wanders a bit longer and come back. I try to keep a track of the state of the calming breath before this deviation and after, and found that irrespective if I am attentive or not, the breath has calmed down as usual. It seems like while the mind is somewhere else, the calming down of the breath happened parallelly. Thought of writing to Bhante and get your valuable feedback. Thank you for your service with Metta. That's the end of the question.
Yeah, actually, it depends on to which you have distracted. Now, say for example, if your mind being distracted to something very exciting, so it might not calms down the breath. But the object that the mind being distracted is a kind of a calm object. It's a fading away object. So it automatically doesn't have any kind of agitation to the mind. Instead, it also has smoothened the mind, so relaxes the mind. So therefore, I mean, depending on the distraction, our vibration, heart vibration, the breathing cycle can vary. But interesting thing is, so this distraction is short-lived. So you may have returned quickly to the breath. Naturally, the breathing becomes then calming down. So the effect or the impact of distraction is quite less. On the other hand, the influence that you have gained through fair amount of association with breathing has a significant impact on the mind so that it becomes very quiet, calm, relaxed. But that short-term distraction, which is even causing little agitation, is in a way ignorable because you again return back to the breathing. So therefore, based on the time duration of distraction as well as the type of distraction, so your breathing can change.
Question number 4 of 9 is a general question. Dear Bhante, I am very grateful to you for explaining the Dhamma in great detail to me, along with guiding me through the processes of cultivating awareness of reality. In practicing the latter, I have always found the intrusion of thought into awareness a hindrance to paying intense attention to inhalation and exhalation of breath. It is quite normal, I assume, to have thoughts arising in the human brain. Therefore, I now let thoughts, images and words arise, but I just watch them like flickering pages in a comic or graphic art book without reading or getting tangled in the narrative story. Am I right in what I do? Thoughts have use to us, humans, for society. It is not that we should have thought, but not have random and uncontrolled thoughts, but rather sustained, clear and concentrated thoughts, such as that will help us accomplish our mental tasks and also be creative or innovative. With Metta, that's the end of the question.
Yeah, actually, you can refer Vitakkasanthana Sutta. So how a person needs to a kind of a master of thinking. So master of thinking does not mean that he thinks too much. Rather, the master of thinking basically means that he can think what he wants, what is beneficial, and he don't think what is useless and not beneficial, harmful. That's it. That means, so the thinking has to come under your control. So once you understand, okay, this way of thinking is useless, it may be harmful to me, you should be able to abandon that, keep the mind very quiet. On the other hand, when there is an opportunity that you understand, okay, I need to think a little bit, I need to analyze the past, I need to little forecast about the future, I need to do a little bit of design, it is useful for my career or something like that, okay, you can think, no problem. But once that is done, again, you need to calm down, relax, keep the mind again quiet. So likewise, so here the point is not that Buddha prohibits thinking, rather thinking is a kind of a tool that we humans have, and we have to use it effectively, correctly, and without being a victim of that very thinking.
Question number 5 of 9. It's a general question. Dear Venerable Sir, what's Arya Kanta Sila? That's the end of the question.
So I think Aryakanta Sila is nothing but the 5 precepts. So you know that the household life, Buddha recommend the 5 precepts. So that is fair enough, even one to become a Sotapanna. So Aryakanta Sila is the person that who is say without much say trouble, he is protecting these 5 precepts. The Sotapanna can easily maintain 5 precepts without much struggle. But for another person, it could be a kind of a burden and it would be difficult. So likewise, some situations are there. But as one is progressing in the Dhamma, so adhering to 5 precepts become quite possible. And they may be doing that wholeheartedly, honestly, and they may even get the benefit from the 5 precepts.
Question number 6 of 9. This is a Dhammasaman question. Bhante, what is the difference between Vedana and emotions? What is the cause of emotions, and is that in the Chittanupassana category? Why is it that place? Also, do Arahant experience neutral feelings? I have heard neutral feelings is based on ignorance. Can one be in a neutral feeling with full awareness without ignorance? Thank you. That's the end of the question.
Yeah, the first section is based on the what, Shamila? I have very short memory.
Yeah. What is the cause of emotions?
Emotions. Okay, that's
Sorry. What is the
difference between Vedana, the feeling, and the emotions. Actually, the feelings are the most fundamental stuff. So you have a painful feeling, you have a pleasurable feeling, you have a neutral feeling. So that becomes more fundamental. But without our awareness, so when these feelings are gathered and we are adding a little bit of thinking onto it, we again and again further develops that situation, and ultimately it become more develop up to a very high level, and then it becomes a very hard or very strongly felt emotion. So once it comes to an emotion level, so it is so also we can say it's a feeling, but it has come to a very high level. It has a fair amount of support coming from the heart, fair amount of support coming from the feelings, fair amount of support coming from perceptions, fair amount of support coming from the formations. That means the thinking. So then it's become a kind of an emotion. Immediately, a feeling can't become an emotion, but at the very fundamental level, what we come across are the feelings. So when one has fair amount of concentration, mindfulness, so one may be able to understand the emotions. But later, as that mindfulness and concentration is further refined, further sharpened, so that emotion may not rise to a very high level. So you may be able to recognize that at very initial stage. Ultimately, you come to the very fundamental level, that is to the feeling level. And what's the next, the second part, Chamila? What's that?
Also, do Arahants experience neutral feelings?
I think so. Because you know that so Arahants not only feel the neutral feelings, they also may feel all the different kinds of feelings, but the interesting thing is they are not grasping them. So there may be feelings, but they are not grasping them. So because the feelings become one of the fundamental part of the human experience. So if you can remember that we were discussing Madhupindika Sutta. So till feelings, so it is very much like kind of a cause and effect relationship. So everyone can go through various different kinds of feelings because the contact happens. But the interesting thing is how we are reacting to them. So are we grasping them and are we holding them? Are we personifying them? Are we adding our own likes and dislikes onto them? Or are we able to simply keep them aside? Are we simply able to, abandon without our any participation, without our any kind of interruption? So then no problem. So the Arahant's case, as far as we can understand through the Dhamma, is where they may be going through various feelings, but they are not doing any kind of their fabrications onto it. They're not adding any stuff onto those feelings because they know feelings are merely feelings. They start, they come, they arise, and they pass away.
Question number 7 of 9. This again a Dhammasaman question. Dear Bhante, thank you for the valuable session. How can one live and work around people who may have limited spiritual awareness and understanding? For example, I have a manager who has high expectations for working, but low understanding of personal and spiritual needs, such as looking after a sick family member. I understand this is both a cultural and spiritual practice to look after our family. I work as hard as I can, but it feels they are never satisfied and expect me to work long hours when I have other obligations. I find it difficult to stay positive in the workplace and connect with colleagues. It is like a different world. I wondered, what is Bhante's advice? Do I need to improve the workplace's understanding on such matters? With metta, that's the end of the question.
Yeah, actually, we can't find, the people that who are with same way of thinking. So they may have different priorities. They are so concerned about their achievements. And he being the administrator, he being the manager, he wants to get the maximum out of you. And that becomes his way of promotion and his way of satisfaction. And all these things maybe matter. So it depends as far as I can see. I mean, we can't give a definite answer here. I feel that in case, say, you are able to convince, okay, this probably these are the matters that I have. I have this kind of situation right now at home, something that we can communicate. But on the other hand, as you said, so different cultures have different priorities. And in our culture, we may be giving so concern about looking after the elders, looking after our parents, and giving so concern about our children. So that is there. But in another culture, they don't much care about it. They may simply put them onto the elder's house, something like that. So there's different societies we are talking here. So there are certain cultural mismatch. So then we come into various conflicts because we are trying to implement our way of thinking, implement our cultural norm in someone else's cultural setup. So then we come into a kind of a conflict. So difficult situation. I mean, these are the questions actually we come across in our life. And it is not so easy. And we can't convince every time the people. So people have different understandings. So they have their, say, it could be narrow scope that may be their thinking. So it's very difficult to convince the people. So these are the questions, lifetime situations that we come across. So without we being frustrated, are we able to continue with this situation? So that should be the way I feel we can handle. So we can't correct the others. So we can try, we can convince, we can give some kind of a light onto their side as well, if possible. But on the other hand, we need to admit, okay, this is a kind of a variety of people that we are living with. We can't expect that everybody to have the same understanding, same spiritual bias, or we can't say the bias, same spiritual interest as we do have. So they have their own priorities and we have our own priorities. So that is something that we need to admit, and we are working with our limitations and they are working with their limitations. So that is something that we need to admit. We can't find a perfect situation.
Bhante, we have 2 more questions. We've come up to the time.
Right.
Can we
continue?
Yeah,
no problem. We'll continue. Yeah.
So question number 8 of 9 is a Dhammasaman question. Dear Bhante, is it documented anywhere the answers that other spiritual leaders of the time have said for these 10 questions discussed today with metta? That's the end of the question.
Yes. I mean, in certain questions, actually, for example, I can't remember whether they have answered all the questions. For example, in certain certain suttas, some people come and report to the Buddha what others have given the answer. For example, Antavaloku, whether the world is finite. Now, one is coming and telling, okay, this particular person has answered using his knowledge, okay, the world is finite. But when I went to another teacher, he said, so suppose the name of that teacher is number A. So number A's answer is wrong because he has finite knowledge. But I have infinite knowledge. With my infinite knowledge, I know the world is infinite. So how are you going to verify? So these answers are not possible to verify. So one can say this world is finite because he has finite knowledge, and another one say, no, this world is infinite, and as a result of that, I can say it is infinite. On the other hand, another one would say, I have kind of a infinite knowledge, and with that infinite knowledge, I know this world is finite. So likewise, either way you can, argue. So therefore it's very difficult. Either way you give an answer, you get trapped. If you say the world is finite, still you can be caught. If you say the world is infinite, again you can be trapped. So therefore we can't find a definite answer to these kind of questions. And there are some other situations like, say, the followers are coming and reporting to the Buddha, okay, my teacher is every time seeing everything. That the omniscience, sarvajna, so that is being defined as you are seeing everything every time. This is my teacher's case. And what is your case? So he is asking from the Buddha. So likewise, people have various this kind of arguments. They come and ask from the Buddha. But the Buddha's sarvajnata jnana, so the omniscient knowledge, is not that Buddha is every time seeing everything. Rather, when he wants to see things, so it becomes, so that area, that matter becomes quite evident to him. It is not that he is every time aware of everything in all around the world, but when he wants to know a particular point, so that area, that particular point becomes quite evident to him. So that includes everything, by the way. Includes everything means wherever he wants to know, that area becomes quite open to him, quite evident to him. So there are such, suttas explaining someone's another view. They have tried to given these some answers to these questions, but ultimately they also become caught from another way.
Question number 9 of 9 is the last question. It's a general question. Dear Bhante, if we are indifferent to scientific findings, example, if dark energy exists and the extent that the universe may end up with, generally we think it is ignorance. Are these scientific investigations actually baseless? Or is it just that they don't support escaping from suffering? With metta, that's the end of the question.
So I like to prefer the second suggestion that you are talking. That is what Buddha also has mentioned. So when people are coming up with all these different difficult questions, so Buddha simply kept them aside and he simply say, okay, these are not relevant to the emancipation. These are not relevant to our liberation. So we are suffering right now. Okay, find out the solution for suffering. And these kind of philosophical questions are waste of time. So he has given a very interesting simile. Probably you all have heard about it. So once a particular person being hit by an arrow, and now a person is coming, he wants to cure this person. Now he wants to take it out. But the person who being hit by the arrow, he stopped. He don't want to allow to cure him. Rather, he is asking, who hit this arrow? Whether it is made up with, steel, or whether it is made up with copper, whether it is made up with this particular tree bark, something like that. So he's asking so many questions about the person who aimed the arrow, who hit the arrow, or the what kind of material the arrow is prepared with. So he's asking so many questions. So ultimately, he's going to die without getting the answers. So likewise, with respect to the whole world, with respect to the whole universe, there are unimaginable amount of information, but during our lifespan, we may not be able to answer all that. If we are going to find out all that, so then we are wasting fair amount of our time. We have very limited lifespan. I mean, if we think about our lifespan being 80 years, during that 80-year duration, 40 years we are spending for sleeping. So we have only 40 years. And for that also, say, we have spent fair amount of time in, learning and, this and that. So almost like 20 years finished. So only 20 years available. So I like to give the answer like that. So don't waste your time.
Thank you, Bhante. So we've come to the end of the written questions, and because we've gone over time, we'll end the program today. To end the program, I would first like to pass our merits and thank Bhante for his valuable time, even with the busy schedule at the monastery. To all the supporters of this program, both seen and unseen, and to the participants for joining today to practice and share their questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thero Saranai.
Yeah, Thero Saranai.